Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar about TagoCore. Has been a while since we had our last webinar last month. We have been doing a lot of progress and we're very glad to share with you. I really appreciate all of you for your time. Thank you for spending time with us here to learning more about how to work with TagoCore. We are recording this section today so that you can watch later. Also, we have the option here for everyone to speak up, to make questions at any time. I am Fabio Rosa. I am the CEO and founder of TagoIO. And the agenda for today is basically around the TagoCore. We're going to start first with an end-to-end application using NodeRED. NodeRED is very famous tool, graphic tool. We are going to have Matt. Matt is going to be present to you how to do application using NodeRED. Then, Matt, you're going to start to talk about how to develop plugins. Okay, one of the foundation of TagoCore is the plugin. That's something that is very easy to use and is very powerful at the same time. So you will not only be able to develop, use a plugin, but also develop and publish. So the last topic is around how to publish your own plugin so that others can use, or private, or you can make it public for your customers, your partners to use the plugin that you're gonna develop. And for last but not least, we are gonna have a session about 10 minutes where we'll be glad to cover the questions. So make sure you use the button on the bottom to make any comment during the day, during the presentation. We are gonna try to answer in real time as possible, writing back to you or to the team, and still at the end, you're gonna be covering. So again, I hope you really enjoyed this webinar. So Matt, go ahead, it's yours.
Thank you, Fabio. Thank you very much. Let me just change the screens here, and there we go. So hello, everyone. My name is Matt. I am one of the lead developers here at TagoIO, and I'm currently working on TagoCore. I'm very excited to be doing this presentation. I think we're going to have a blast. And we have a bunch of things to cover, so let's just jump right into it. So right here, so first off, before we actually start going over our summary, I think everyone or most of you know how these webinars usually go. The way we do these is we present all of the features that are going to be heading into production into the new version about a week from now. So right now we will show everything that will be heading to production for the new version. And just looking at the screen right here, we can see that we have a couple of new plugins. We have at the very bottom, we have a NodeRED plugin, and we also have a MySQL plugin. Now, these are not available for everyone. As I've just mentioned, these are only available in my version and in the version, the future version, which will be released a week from now. And for those of you who are not familiar with either of these plugins, NodeRED, as Fabio mentioned, is basically a flow-based development tool for visual programming, and MySQL is another database where you can store TagoCore data. If you guys have used TagoCore before, you know that every version so far up until now had the SQLite database, and this is a compact database that allows you to store data in a single file. And MySQL is sort of an upgrade because it allows you to scale your TagoCore application much better since you can connect to an external server and then upgrade that external server. SQLite is basically a very simple solution for you to start developing with TagoCore. So I'm very excited to be releasing those plugins in the future. And the first thing that we're going to cover here is the NodeRED application. So I think most of you know or have some kind of experience with NodeRED, and if you don't, that's fine as well. As I've mentioned, NodeRED is a visual tool, And our goal here with this NodeRED plugin is to create a dashboard to visualize incoming data or the actual data of TagoCore. So our plan here is to configure our freezer simulator plugin, which is just a plugin that keeps constantly pumping out data in our TagoCore. And we're gonna visualize this data in a very nice dashboard. Before I show you this whole process, I just want to take a step back and show you our TagoCore system or our TagoCore integration in our TagoIO cloud platform. Just a reminder, and we've mentioned this in past webinars, keep in mind that we're not going to be covering the TagoIO TagoCore integration, but just know that there is a way for you to integrate and send data from your TagoCore over to TagoIO cloud. All you have to do is have an account in TagoIO and then go over to your TagoCore, connect your both of your instances, so your TagoCore with TagoIO Cloud, and then you'll see your instance right here. You can visualize the local IP of your instance. You can also visualize the computer usage, the summary. So it's a pretty powerful feature. But this is just, I just wanted to mention this because we didn't cover it in specific details in the past webinar. So I just wanted to mention, but we're not going to be covering in details in this webinar. So as I've mentioned in TagoIO, we do have some dashboards where you can build your applications, and it's truly a wonderful feature because it allows you to visualize the data. And the cool thing is, if you don't want to send the data over to the cloud, you can visualize your data locally through NodeRED. And this is where we actually start using NodeRED to visualize the data. So first thing, we need to configure the freezer simulator because our goal here is to visualize the data that this freezer simulator plugin generates. If you guys are not familiar with this plugin, what it basically does is generate random data simulating a freezer somewhere in the world. So basically, it keeps constantly sending data based to a device that you specified. And as you can see, it's asking us to select the freezer type and the device ID. Now, we do not have any devices in this TagoCore, so let's create a new device for our freezer, and let's call it freezer. There we go. Now let's go back to our freezer plugin. Actually, I need to copy the ID first, so let me just copy the ID right here. You can also copy it from the device ID at the More tab. I'm just going to copy and paste it right here. For the freezer type, I will select freezer 1. If you guys don't know the difference, simply read the description on the left side. And the temperature unit is Fahrenheit, and we're going to update or actually send data every 5 seconds. I'm just going to be hitting save here. And this freezer simulator is now constantly sending data every 5 seconds to this device. If I go over to my devices page, we can actually see that the last input of this device was 3 seconds ago. So it is working. To make sure or to actually visualize the data, we can go over to our buckets and click on show amount. We have 9 data points. And if we click this, now we have 12 just by the time we clicked. And the variables now, we can see everything that the freezer simulator is sending to this bucket. So that's step 1, right? We can actually send data and you do not need to use the freezer simulator. This is just, you could use a physical device, for instance. This is just a way for us to make it easy for you to understand. Our goal here, just recapping, is to visualize this data in a NodeRED dashboard. And this is why we have a NodeRED plugin. So if I click on this plugin, we have some configurations or some fields on the right side. First off, we have a NodeRED URL, and we have a username and a password. Now, the criteria or the requirements for you to utilize this NodeRED plugin is you need to have a running NodeRED server. It could be a local NodeRED server. It could be external, where you could access from a actual link in the internet. But in this case, I have a NodeRED server running on localhost at 1880. So this server is already running. If I grab this URL and open it in a new tab, we can actually see that I have NodeRED running right here. And it is configured properly. So that's step 1 to configuring this plugin. Now, just as I entered here in the NodeRED flow, you guys may have noticed that I already have an application running. And this application is what we actually use, or actually this flow is what we actually use to visualize incoming data. Now, I'm not going to go into too much details because NodeRED is it's quite difficult to understand every single detail. So it does require you to have some level of experience with NodeRED, but I am going to be explaining how this flow works. What we're doing here, if we start from the left side, is we're creating a flow that, first off, creates an endpoint to receive data. And this is very important because since our goal is to visualize data from TagoCore, we need a way for us to integrate TagoCore data and NodeRED data. And this is the link that we will use to actually connect the TagoCore data with NodeRED. And this endpoint, if we actually click it, is nothing more than just an HTTP endpoint. So once we actually create this node here in NodeRED, NodeRED keeps listening to this endpoint right here called NodeRED data, and it listens for post requests. And this is what TagoCore will do. It will send post requests over to NodeRED. And since NodeRED is listening for post requests on this endpoint, everything will be connected by default. Now, once we actually send data from TagoCore to NodeRED, we need to parse the data because NodeRED doesn't understand the data format of TagoIO. So this is why we need those functions right here. We have 4 of them. And their functionality, their script is actually extremely simple. All we're doing, if I actually click one of these functions, is I'm grabbing the payload from NodeRED and extracting the door status variable. And this door status variable, if we go back to TagoCore right here, in the freezer simulator, is one of the variables that this freezer simulator sends. So recapping once more, this freezer simulator is sending data to our buckets, and we're gonna redirect this data to NodeRED. NodeRED will be ready to receive this data because we have set an endpoint, and once the data reaches NodeRED, it will parse the data accordingly, or I think the more appropriate word would be, it will divide the data, and then it will set the data in 4 different widgets. Now let's go to the visuals, right? Because up until now, it's all talk. We have not show you guys anything. So let's show you the dashboard. If I click on this button right here, it will open the dashboard in a new tab. And you guys can actually see that our dashboard to visualize incoming freezer data is empty. There's no data whatsoever. Doesn't look like that good, but we'll fix that. So going back to NodeRED right here, our flow is already done. This is pretty easy to do, so I'm not going to show you the process of actually building this. I'm just going to show you the whole final result. And so what we need to do now is actually send data to NodeRED because the whole flow is ready to receive data. And in TagoCore, our freezer simulator is sending data to our bucket. The only thing we need to do, or the only thing missing really, is for us to redirect the bucket data. Once it reaches the bucket, we want to also send the data over to NodeRED. And this is where the NodeRED plugin comes in. We have set the URL right here. So this URL allows us now to have an address to point to NodeRED. So we're going to go over to actions now because this is the way that we'll use to communicate TagoCore or to actually link TagoCore and NodeRED. Once data reaches the bucket, we're going to create an action to then redirect or send the data over to NodeRED as well. So the data will be in our bucket, but we'll also send it to NodeRED. So let's create a new action. And the name for action, I think it's pretty interesting, or I think it's correct to say that we'll send to NodeRED. And the trigger for this action is variable because we want to trigger it when a variable arrives in a bucket. And for the type, we want to send data to NodeRED. And this option is only available because we have installed the NodeRED plugin. And this is why it's important that for this integration to work, you install the plugin. It's a much more solid process instead of just sending a post request manually. So we're going to grab this option right here. And for the endpoint, if you guys remember in the beginning of the presentation, I told you, or I explained that we have an endpoint to receive data. And the endpoint address is NodeRED data. So we're going to grab this and go over to my TagoCore and paste it right here. So basically, what we're doing here is we're sending data to NodeRED when the data reaches our buckets. So let's confirm. Now, the last thing that we need is to identify the device to listen for incoming data. The action doesn't know which devices it must listen to, because you could have, for instance, 1,000 devices. And so what you can do here is specify which devices the action needs to listen in order to trigger the actual functionality of sending to NodeRED. So if we select the device here, we already have one, which we created just a couple of moments ago, called freezer. I'm just going to be picking that. And for the variable, I am going to be typing internal temperature, because this is one of the variables that the freezer simulator sends. And for the value, I'm just going to pick anything. And I'm going to be hitting save right here. Now, if I go over to actions, what we need to do, first off, we must check if the device is sending data correctly. And if we go to actions, the last triggered time you can see was a few seconds ago. So the data was correctly identified and the action was correctly triggered. Awesome. So if we go to our dashboard, you can actually see that it is working. This is showing data in real time because our freezer simulator is sending data to our bucket. And then once it reaches the bucket, it also triggers our action and sends to the NodeRED endpoint. And this is why we can actually see incoming data in real time. And of course, the design here doesn't look that good. Obviously, it does the job, but you can always improve this and make it much prettier, much better, right? Based on your needs. This is just an example, sort of imitating the basic freezer simulator dashboard that we have on TagoIO Cloud. So I hope that was a very interesting functionality combo for you guys. Basically, we're connecting NodeRED functionality to TagoCore. Every time TagoCore data is inserted, we send it over to NodeRED. And again, you don't need to have NodeRED running locally. You could have it running on an external server. The only criteria, the only requirement is that you need to be able to have access to NodeRED. And you can also configure NodeRED credentials if you have set that up. In my case, though, I didn't set that up. So this is why I have not set a username, any password, only my local address right here. Awesome. Okay, so this was the first point in our summary. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Now let's get to the more interesting part of the presentation. We're actually going to develop plugins, and this is going to take a little bit of time, but it's important that you guys understand this because this is the base of TagoCore. Everything in TagoCore is based around in plugins. So you need to understand how to actually create one. And just by understanding how to develop a single plugin, you gain a more deeper understanding of the way that TagoCore works and how and what you can do with plugins. So what we're going to create here is a new plugin that it's going to basically simulate the freezer simulator functionality. We're going to create a copy here. And I understand that that's not very original, but this plugin, this freezer simulator plugin, has so many tiny mechanics inside of it that it's very important that we understand everything that a plugin can do. And I think this example, since it just keeps constantly sending static data, is the best example that I think I can show you guys in order to develop a plugin. So our goal here is to create a freezer simulator copy. Of course, we're not gonna create it with as much polish because we don't have that much time here, but it is gonna work and it is gonna send data to a device that we have informed. So let's get going. First off, to create TagoCore plugins, you need to first have an understanding of Node.js and JavaScript, and this is very important. It's gonna be very difficult for you if you do not have an understanding of Node.js. In this scenario, though, I am going to be guiding everyone here, but if you are planning on developing your own plugins, you need to understand Node.js and JavaScript. The full list of requirements is over at our website, tagocore.com/docs. That's our documentation center. We have a very concise documentation about building plugins or developing plugins. So if at any point here during the presentation, you feel a little bit lost, make sure you head over to our documentation. And now that we know the requirements, we're actually going to start developing the plugin. There are two ways for you to install or sort of debug your application in TagoCore, debug your plugin in TagoCore. First off, you could just install your plugin right here. But to actually install your plugin right here, you need to be able to pack your plugin in a gzipped tarball and install it via this button. And this doesn't really work if you are trying to actively develop your plugin, because once you install your plugin here, you cannot change it, right? So this button is really more indicated if you are trying to maybe share your plugin with a coworker or a friend or maybe some other person, but it's not ideal for active development. If you are planning on step-by-step create your plugin, the ideal way is to create your Node.js project right into the plugins folder right here. This plugin folder is TagoCore's folder, and once TagoCore starts, it basically reads every single plugin that is located in this folder and loads it into the system. So the ideal way is for us to put our project in this folder, and you can change this folder. So you do not need to basically copy your project and paste it right here. You can first off just start your project in this folder, or maybe start somewhere and then change this plugins folder right here. Keep in mind though that every time you install a plugin, it is saved in this location. So if you change this location, your previously installed plugins will no longer be loaded. They won't be deleted, but they won't be loaded into TagoCore. So in this case, we are going to be creating a new project in this folder right here. Now, I already have prepared a little demonstration here. I'm just going to be pulling my terminal here. And right here, I am inside of my terminal in this location. So where it says plugins, I am in the plugins folder. If we do an ls command right here, for those of you who are not familiar, this basically lists all the folders in the current folder, in the current directory. And I have two of them. I have one for NodeRED, and I have another one for the freezer simulator. Now, I understand that the ID is kind of confusing, or this long hash is confusing, but this is the actual ID of the plugin. But don't worry about this if you are developing your own plugin. This is just, the ID is here just because the plugin store installs it like this. If you are developing your own plugin, you can type whatever folder name you desire. And in this case, we're going to create a new plugin called sample plugin. So I'm just going to be creating a new folder here called sample plugin. And if I do an ls again, you can see that now we have three folders, one for the NodeRED, one for the freezer, and one for our future plugin. I'm just going to be heading into our plugin, and our folder is empty because we have just created it. So I'm going to be starting a new Node.js project. Just going to be doing npm init -- yes. And what this does is it creates a package JSON, which is basically the manifest of a Node.js project. Now, this is the basic configuration right here. And the ideal thing now is to actually use a text editor or something that has a little more capability than just a command or a terminal, a command line. So for this demonstration, I am going to be using VS Code. You can use whatever you prefer. However, we do recommend VS Code because we do have plans to create extensions for VS Code in the future. Either way though, I'm going to be opening this sample plugin in a VS Code window. So for that, I'll just type code space period. And there we go. It opened my code right here. There we go. Now, as you can see, let's just maximize this. We have a package JSON, and that's the only file that we have. If we open this, we can actually see that it's pretty much empty because we just started the project. Now, just like Node.js has its sort of manifest, which is this package JSON, TagoCore also needs its specific manifest. So it needs a manifest that is specific to TagoCore. And for that, and the way we create this TagoCore manifest is just by adding a property in the package JSON called TagoCore. And there we go, our manifest is ready. Now, of course, we need to set some properties here in order for our application to work. And the first one is name. we need to supply a name for our TagoCore plugin. In this case, though, since we are calling it sample plugin, I think the sample plugin with a little bit more prettified, so to speak, it looks a little bit better, right? And there we go. Let's just close our open editors. And that's all you need to run your plugin. Now, as you can see, we have TagoCore, we have a name right here, and we have the name of the project. Do not confuse both of them. One is the name of the actual project for the package, and another one is the visual name in TagoCore. Now, to develop your plugins, you need an SDK, and we provide that for you through the name of TagoCore SDK. So that's a package you can install by using NPM or Yarn in the future, and then you can use that package to actually develop functionality for your plugin. So for this, I'm just going to be opening my terminal right here in my VS Code, and I'm going to install the Node or SDK via NPM. So I'm just going to do npm install at tago-io TagoCore SDK. Now, usually what you want to do is when developing plugins for TagoCore, you usually want to match the SDK version with the actual TagoCore version. Now, this TagoCore version that I am going to be releasing in about a week or so is the version 0.3.3. So usually you want to match the TagoCore version with the actual SDK version. So let's install the TagoCore SDK version 3.3. And then we have now released this version right now. So this is why I am going to be adding this little thing at the bottom, at the end, actually. But don't worry about this. This is just the alpha version of TagoCore. When this hits YouTube, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, or even the live audience here, when this new version actually is released, you can just simply ignore the alpha and use the full released version. However, since we didn't release it yet, let's just install this and let's wait a bit. Now they say you shouldn't install things while you are presenting. I understand that. So I do have a backup if something goes wrong. So don't worry about that. But either way, it worked. We have our SDK here. It's fine and dandy. Now, all we have to do is start developing because we have our SDK, we have our manifest, and now we need the code because we want to make something that looks like the freezer simulator, right? So for this, if you look at main right here, we are pointing to an index.js file. And this is where our code, our plugin code will reside. So let's create an index.js file. And now comes the actual coding part, right? And it's very important that you guys understand how functionality is added to TagoCore. So I'm going to be importing it from our SDK right here. And I am going to be importing it. If I just open all the options here and just scroll to the bottom, you can see that we have a bunch of modules that we have to, or we can import from our SDK. Starting from the top, we have an action trigger, an action type, a database, a payload encoder, a service, and we have a base TagoCore module class. Think of modules as functionalities, right, guys? So if you want to, for instance, encode data or encode the data from your devices before it hits the bucket, you can use a payload encoder module. So think of module as functionalities. If you want to create a different database, you can use a database module. So for instance, we had the SQLite database, right? I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation. And the way we created the MySQL database is via the database module. Once you use this module, you can override a bunch of functions to save all kinds of different data from TagoCore. You can also create an action type module, which if you guys paid attention, is what NodeRED or NodeRED plugin did. It created an action type to send data to NodeRED. And you can also create an action trigger, which basically decides if your action will be triggered or not. Last but not least, though, we do have a service module. And this, in my opinion, is one of the most powerful functionalities or modules that you can have because it allows you to run your code without any needs of, or without any events, so to speak. Because if you think about it, our payload encoder will only run when a device sends data. A database will only save when something needs to be saved. Same thing goes for the action type and action trigger. They will only work when an action is involved. The service module allows you to create a server or pretty much anything that you want without being restricted to events. And in this case, this is what we want, because our plugin will keep constantly sending data without the need for events. It doesn't depend on anything. So we're gonna require this service module, and this is a class, so we must instantiate it right here. Just going to be doing new service module and opening a JSON right here. Each module needs to have an ID and a name. So I'm just going to be putting the ID as my service and the name as my service. There we go. Now, the ID has to be unique for this plugin. So it doesn't matter if there is another plugin with the same module ID, as long as you don't have, for instance, another service module here with the same ID. Okay, so it needs to be unique, but only for this plugin. Okay, we have our plugin running. It doesn't do anything. So we need to make it do something, because right now, if we install this in TagoCore, it's just gonna be a blank page that doesn't do anything. So if I go back to TagoCore and go over to our freezer simulator, we can actually see that this freezer simulation requires input from the user. And if I don't set a device ID, this simulation does not work. And we're gonna do the same thing in our plugin. We're gonna ask the user for a device ID, and we're only gonna start the simulation or the actual sending. We're gonna only send data when the device has been set. And to require input from the user, we need to use the configs property right here. Think of configs as fields. Each field in the array is a JSON, and you can set some properties for the field. So for instance, you can set the name, which is the visual label of the field. I'm just going to be putting this as device ID. And you can also set an icon. So the icon will be device, and you can get a full list of possible icons by using TypeScript or something where you can actually visualize the data from the module. And you can actually also set a field, and the field will be a unique name for you to grab this value later on. So in this case, I think device underscore ID is best. And let me see if there's something missing. I think that's it. So we can have a name, an icon, and a field. Another thing, though, I think it's good that we set is the type of our field is a string type. So you can have a bunch of different types in TagoCore, as you can see right here. In this case, though, a string is best. Awesome. Now we actually have something to look at. Our code doesn't do anything just yet, and that's fine. But first, let's try and load this plugin in TagoCore. So we're going to go to TagoCore, and if we refresh the page, you can actually see that our plugin is not here yet, because I've mentioned that in the beginning of the presentation, TagoCore only loads plugins for the first time when it boots up, when it starts, and it doesn't look at this plugins folder anymore. So for the very first time, what you need to do here is simply restart TagoCore. Now, I am restarting TagoCore off screen here. If you are running the TagoCore binary, which you should, simply close it and start it up once again. Okay, now I'm just going to be refreshing the page, and you can actually see our simple plugin. There are some errors, and that's fine. If we actually click this plugin, first off, you can see that it doesn't have an icon. So that looks a little bit weird, but we'll fix that later. But most importantly, we have a validation error. It says that the types is required, and it really is. We messed up. So let's go back to our Visual Studio. You can actually see that we are using a service module. So we need to declare that we are using the service module to TagoCore, so it understands that this plugin is correct, is legit, right? So let's go to our package, and let's create a new property here called types. And types is an array of strings, and each string is a module that you are using in your application. In this case, we are only using the service module. And again, this is needed because TagoCore needs to understand that you are declaring every single module that you are using. So you cannot use, for instance, a payload encoder if you didn't declare it in the types variable. For instance, the encoder name is actually encoder. If you were to use a database module, you could set database here, so on and so forth. The full list of properties is located at our documentation. So let's just erase this. Now we have the types. Everything is working fine. Let's go back to TagoCore and let's reload the plugin. And as you can see, it worked. Now let's refresh the page. And as you can see, everything works fine. Now we do have some errors here, so don't worry about that, but at least our plugin is loaded and we actually have a device ID. So that's awesome. Now the next thing that we need is to actually implement the functionality of our TagoCore or of our plugin, because right now it's not complete. So let's go over to our functionality here. Let's go over to index and let's close this. There we go. Now our plugin doesn't do anything, so we must implement certain lifecycle events in order for it to do something. And the first lifecycle event that we will implement is onload. Every time our plugin is loaded, TagoCore will call the onload function of each module that we have defined. And keep in mind, you could have tons of modules inside of your plugin. So every time our plugin gets loaded, TagoCore by default calls the onload functionality. And it calls the onload with the values from our configuration. So in this case, it's calling onload with the device ID. But keep in mind, this is a JSON. So you could extract the device ID simply by accessing the property. So for instance, we can just define a new variable and grab the device ID from our configuration, like so. So inside of config will be device ID. Keep in mind though, this device ID may be empty because the user hasn't set a value for this just yet. Either way though, this onload allows us to grab the values from our users. Now, what we're going to do here is grab a physical, or not a physical, we're going to grab a device record based on the device ID. And for that, we're going to use the core functionality. So I'm just going to be using device, and we're going to use await because all of core's API is based on promises. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about what that is. And if we import the core functionality over here, we can then access its methods. In this case, though, we can actually access the get device info based on the device ID. I think for those of you who do understand a little bit of Node.js and JavaScript, I think you kind of understand what is going on here. We grab the device ID and then we grab a device. Now we're actually going to log this device so we can see how logging works in plugins. I'm just going to be hitting save here, going over to our TagoCore application. And once your plugin actually shows up here, you do not need to keep restarting TagoCore. All you need to do is hit disable and enable once again. There we go. Now our plugin is already sort of working. We can set the device ID right here. And in this case though, let's just set a random device ID. Okay. Now, the way this works is our device ID needs to exist in order for us to actually use data, right? For us to actually find a device ID, it needs to exist in our application. So we're going to go ahead and grab a device ID right here. Just going to be grabbing this, going over to our simple plugin and pasting it right here. Now, usually what you want to do is test your application in a more consistent environment, right? So what we're gonna do here is let me just restart TagoCore because there is sort of this error that I don't know why it's going on here. So let me just go over to my package and let me restart TagoCore. Just a second. There we go. I'm restarting TagoCore. There we go. Much better. Okay, so let's keep going. So as you can see, there was this little error that showed up here in our module status, and that's fine. All we had to do was restart TagoCore, and now we have a different error. But if you guys are programmers, you know that if you get a different error, it's always a progress. And in this case, we can easily handle this error. We have a valid device right here, but it says that it failed to call get device info because we need the device permission. Okay, and this is easily solvable. All you have to do is go over to your manifest and add a permissions array, okay? Now, this is the last thing that we need to add, okay, I promise. We had to add the types, now we have to add the permissions. And permissions is basically what your plugin needs in order for, or what your plugin needs to access from TagoCore. In this case, we only need the device because we are trying to access the device info and we do not need, and we don't have the device permission. So TagoCore security system says, hey, there is something wrong because you didn't specify that you wanted devices. So why are you trying to grab or trying to find a device, right? And let's just future-proof this and also add the device data because we will be handling data in this plugin. Awesome. So let's just save this, go back to our index, go back to our Chrome, disable our plugin, enable it once again, and there we go, no errors. And this is awesome because this allows us now to actually visualize the log from our plugin. So if you guys remember, going back to our plugin once again, we got the device info and then we set a console.log device. So if we click on view logs right here, we can actually see a device. And that's awesome because we're grabbing the device from TagoCore because we have the permissions and then we are simply logging the data from the device. So we have a full view of what this device is. Now we're actually gonna add the functionality. If we go back to our sample plugin, we wanna send data every second. I think every second is fine. So we're gonna send data every second. So let's go to our code here and let's add an interval, okay? So let's go and do this. Set interval. And we're gonna set this interval as an async method. And inside of here, we're also gonna add some variables up on the top. One is called index. Another one is called data. And this is the data that we're gonna cycle through and send each data point inside of this data array at a time, every second. So for this, we're gonna add a bunch of variables here. First off, let's add a variable called temperature. And this is TagoIO's data format, if you are not familiar with it. And the variable is temperature. The value, let's start with 71, and the unit is Fahrenheit. There we go. Now let's sort of duplicate this data because we want to have a sort of a loop of data. So let's add 65, 61, and then maybe goes back to 64. Then let's go back to 70, 80, and 85. And our goal here is to send each data point 1 second apart. So it's going to send the 71, then the 65, and when it gets to the bottom, we reset. So it's very easy to do that. All we need to do is grab the current data point based on the index, and then we increase the index. And if the index is greater than data.length, all we have to do is reset the index. Now the data point is going to be each data point here sequentially. And our interval will run every second. We do not need the log of the device anymore. All we want to do now is actually add this data in our device. So for this, we're going to also use the core functionality to add device data. And we're going to grab the device ID and we're going to set the data point because this is what we want to insert. And we do not need the device no longer. We already have the ID and that's all we need to add the data. There we go. Now this will work if I just save this and go over to my Chrome, disable this plugin, re-enable it. It should be working fine. Now, I think there was a little bit of a mistake on my part because we didn't set any logs, and that's fine. And we can actually see data being inserted into the freezer device, rather. If we click on freezer and go over to bucket page right here, go over to variables, we can actually see a mix of variables because keep in mind, the freezer simulator is still running. So the freezer simulator is sending data and our sample plugin is also sending data. This is why you have a bunch of temperatures right here and some status as well. So let's just go over to our freezer and shut it down for now. We do not want any more data. We only want our data. But it is working. If we go back once again to our buckets, we can actually see our data right here. One thing though is that I mentioned that we have the onload. Every time TagoCore wants to start your plugin, it calls the onload of every module, but it also calls the onDestroy of every module every time a module needs to be destroyed. So think of these both functions as lifecycle methods that allow you to perform certain actions based on their life cycle. So onload is when the module gets started, onDestroy is when the module gets destroyed. Both are async methods, which means they must return promises. And in this case, though, what we need to do is make sure that we are removing this interval, because right here in our plugin functionality, we can start and stop each individual module. But if we actually stop this, right now I don't have my the latest version of my plugin. If I just stop this, you guys may understand that our data is still being inserted, right? So if I go to buckets, you can actually see that we have this much data. If I click this, we have more data, even though we actually stopped our module. And the reason for that is the interval is still running. So the onDestroy method is a great place for you to clean up your plugin, right? So we're going to create a new variable here called interval, and let's set it to null, and then grab it right here, the instance of the interval, and clear it right here. There we go. Now, when we actually stop our module, it's gonna stop. It's not gonna keep sending data, even though we set it to stopped. And our plugin is done, guys. Okay, so we had a bit of a rough patch with that error, but our plugin is done. It is working. I mean, it can't be a coding session without some errors, right? Either way, though, let's keep going. Our plugin is done. If I did refresh the page or reload the plugin, it will have the latest version. But since we are running a bit out of time, let's head over to our next feature, which is actually publishing the plugin to everyone in the world. If you just want to use a simple plugin, you can do what I've mentioned right here. But in this case, we want to publish this plugin. And you need a couple of things in order for you to publish. First off, you need a short description of your plugin. And a short description is a description of up to 100 characters. And we're just going to put "this is my plugin" because we are running out of time. We also have a full description, and this is the README of your plugin. This is what shows up right here, where it says no information available. If we click, for instance, the freezer simulator, we can see very nice README. And this is indicated by the full description. So this is a path to a markdown file. In this case, we're going to put readme.md, and we're also going to be creating this README right here. And we're going to put the only content of the README as hello, everyone in the webinar. There we go. Now we also need an icon, because if you look, if you guys paid attention, we do not have an icon. So let's put an icon, and the icon needs to be a PNG with a certain aspect ratio. However, I have already prepared my icon right here. Doesn't look that good, I know, but the important thing is that it works, right? It's just a sample icon. Don't worry about it. There we go. Now, I think we have everything that we need. We have types, permission, we have descriptions, and an icon. So our plugin is done. Now, before we submit this to the plugin store, we need to compress our plugin into a TagoCore file. And the way you do this is by using our SDK. So since we have already installed our SDK, we can just create a new script here called pack, and then use the TagoCore plugin pack command. And what this does, it's gonna basically pack our whole plugin in a single file, and then you can submit that file to the plugin store. So let's just increase the terminal height a bit, and let's just run npm run pack. There we go. Everything worked out. Amazing. So if we just pull this up a bit, you can see that it added pretty much every single file that we have in our application. It doesn't add node modules. I think that's pretty obvious. And it has the details of our package plugin. It's using 5 files, and it has a very small size, 29 kilobytes. Okay, now let's actually publish this. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go over to our Chrome. And here we are inside of TagoCore's website. Now it may look a little bit different from the website that you guys have, simply because I am logged in right here. The login functionality is not available for everyone at the moment, but do not worry, it is going to be available in about a week from now. So we're just going to click on my name, and once you are logged in to our website, you can then publish a plugin, visualize your own plugins, or sign out. So let's first visualize our own plugins. And there we go. We do not have any plugins, because if you look at our plugin store right here, let me just go back to TagoCore, there are no plugins from Matt B. So that's my account, doesn't have any plugins. The only plugins available are from TagoIO. So we're gonna actually publish a plugin because the website is telling us to do, right? Why not start now? And this is what we're gonna do. So let's just click this. And now we can actually publish a plugin. I am, one thing though that I want to make sure that everybody understands here, for you to actually utilize our website, you need to have an account on TagoIO. You cannot create an account on TagoCore only. You need to go over to TagoCore, or I'm sorry, you need to go over to TagoIO Cloud, create an account there, and then you can log in to the TagoCore platform. And so here we have publishers, and just so you guys understand, each publisher is a profile in your TagoIO Cloud account. In this case, I only have a single profile. So this is why I only have one publisher. So every time you hear publisher, just know it is a single profile in your TagoIO account. We're gonna select my publisher, and you can do a platform specific or cross-platform publish. Platform specific, you can add multiple files, one for each platform. Our plugin though is very simple. We do not need this. So let's just pick a cross-platform, and we can then select our file. Let's select our file, sample plugin, the TagoCore which we have just generated, open it right here. And then we have this little checkbox, make the plugin version visible in the store. I am in a webinar, so I don't want people to install this plugin, right? It doesn't make much sense. So I am going to be unchecking this. So it is going to publish our plugin, but no one will be able to install it. And you can change this configuration later on. And this is ideal if you are just publishing now in order for you to premiere sort of your plugin later on. Let's agree to the terms and publish our plugin. And it's gonna calculate a little bit. It's gonna upload our plugin. It's gonna verify. And it said right here, it's gonna send an email to me. That's fine. Now let's actually view my plugins. And there we go. Our plugin is published. It would be in the store had I marked the checkbox to actually visualize my plugin publicly, but I didn't. And here we have our publisher, which is Matt B. The publisher only has one plugin, and we can publish another plugin under this publisher. So if I click on this little plugin right here, it says that the publish date is this one. We have a version 1.0.0, and it is successfully published. It is not visible in the store. If I wanted it to be visible, all I have to do is click on this checkbox. However, I'm not going to do that just because it may affect other people who are just visiting the store at this moment. And we can also delete this plugin if we have submitted a wrong version by accident. We can also copy the plugin Slug and copy its ID. Awesome. Last thing here, guys, just before we quit, it's a long webinar, I understand that, but one more thing, we have generated a TagoCore file with the pack command. You can install this sample plugin directly via the sidebar. So if we go here, you can actually select install local plugin, select that same TagoCore packed file and install it right here. But again, that isn't recommended just because it's usually if you want to send a finished plugin, and this plugin isn't really finished. Now, this plugin still doesn't have an icon just because I didn't reload it. Maybe I have to refresh my TagoCore. Let's just see if I enable it, if it's gonna work. There we go. It shows up the icon. So our beautiful sample icon right here. Okay. Now, I think that's it, guys, from my side. I do have a little bit of challenge for you guys. Right here, we are sending data every 1 second to this device. I challenge everyone here who wants to develop a plugin to create a new field and grab the frequency of updates that our plugin is sending. Something like our freezer simulator. But instead of having a select, I want you guys to use a simple typed input where you can actually type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then grab whatever millisecond amount the user set here and apply it in your own loop right here. I think that's a very nice challenge, especially for everyone here who is trying to develop their first plugin. Okay, yeah, so that's it from my side. Do we have any questions, Fabio?
Thank you, Matt. No, that's great. I know that we passed the time here, but it's a lot of work, and also some people here are saying that's great too, very excited. others say, hey, it's too long. So yeah, I understand, because we went beyond to the fact that we could show just a application and so on. We spend time here showing how to build a plugin, and extremely powerful, right? And also how to publish. So I see other things like questions relate to the topics here, database, that I'm gonna do here in a minute. Okay, let me get one here. For example, do I need scripts to run, to access data from my SQLite? I think the answer, Matt, is not. They can access directly data inside of the database. Do you want to articulate on this a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, as Fabio mentioned, you do not need our plugins come in full on, they're ready to be used. So for SQLite, all you have to do is when you install a TagoCore version, it comes already configured with the database file right here. So you just need to use it. And the same thing goes for the MySQL. If I go to the store here, the MySQL will come with all of the pre-configured things. So all you need to do is set the address of your server and you can start using it. So it works pretty much like in a database. You can grab data from it and you can access it normally.
Yeah, other thing that I see, I think a question 2 times, what's the difference between why you're gonna use TagoCore versus Mosquito? I answered that, I hope it's clear, but MQTT is just one thing, okay? Very important, and there are other tools there, okay? But for us, just one thing. So overall, TagoCore is really allow you to have your own IoT platform. Right now, we're talking about on the edge, so you can run TagoCore here on your Raspberry Pi, your Mac, your desktop, but pretty soon, we already work on that, you'll be able to deploy this on the cloud as well, right? You can put this on Azure, AWS, so you can have your own cloud solution completely here and store all the data, let's say locally or under your control, not even send it to Tago. And also other advantage is that this is well integrated for TagoIO, Tago Run, so you have the benefit to easily reuse what you have on Tago, all the connectors that we have, our visualization there. And last, although we don't have here today, and people say sometimes, hey, I really do like you guys to have the dashboards. There are other dashboards around, and we are going to be creating tutorials about how to integrate, like with Grafana, or this one very simple here that we show using NodeRED. So take a look at TagoCore.com. Take a look there, what you have, and also our community. I just put the link there in our, yeah, it's good that we're showing. So you have our community, our forum, because that's open source, free tool. We really want people to go and make questions and suggestions and show what we're doing using the community as well. Okay, so I don't have anything else. I don't see any other question here. Of course, some people will be glad to contact directly to answer or get more feedback. We are going to be deploying some of these features here that you showed today, Matt, at the end of this year, beginning of on Monday. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, most of the features that we've shown here will be released in the upcoming week.
Yeah. So for everyone that put their email here on this screen on TagoCore, you will receive a notification when that's ready. So you can download the latest version and get the plugin as well. All right, so we just passed the time. I hope we answer all questions here. I don't see any new question. I would be glad to continue answer again from the community. So Matt, thank you very much for your time. Thank everyone, and we'll be sharing this video later today. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.